All right, and we are live, folks. First of all, thank you for joining this evening. For those of you dialing in the Netherlands, thank you especially because I know it's one of the first few days of sun we've had here, and you could be out at a canal drinking some wine or a beer, and instead you've joined us. So appreciate that. I suppose that goes for most places in Europe today. So really excited about tonight. We've got some amazing people joining us, some old friends, some new friends. Before we jump in, a quick who we are as OfferZen, for those of you that don't know us. We're an online developer talent marketplace, so basically a place where software developers can get jobs that they love. We were started by two software developers themselves. They realized basically software developers have insane amounts of potential to change the world and have impact in both businesses and society. And unlocking that potential means that we can make our mark in the world. And we do this by primarily helping them get great jobs at great companies and broadening their horizons and finding jobs that they wouldn't otherwise would have known existed. But we also do a whole bunch of other stuff that we invest into the tech community. So when we're not finding or helping developers find jobs where they can grow and have an impact, we're doing other stuff that is essentially takes the form of investing in the tech community, hoping that it'll unlock some potential there. One of those things that we do, we believe quite fundamentally that data and information can empower people. So one of the big things that we try and do is publish as much of our platform data as we can and surface data through surveys, which I'll talk through a little bit later. And get other people that have data, like LinkedIn, and other people who have great lived stories, which is data in itself, like Jeremy, who's joined us tonight, and really planning to just make that available. Hopefully, it's useful for you tonight and can guide you in your career and in some small way, unlock your potential. So that's the thinking. That's who we are, and that's why we're doing tonight. So we'll start off with Ray. He's from LinkedIn. LinkedIn, as you know, is a pretty big platform. They have an insane amount of data, and like us, they share the philosophy that making this data available to the public is a useful thing, and it creates value in the world. So I personally find the LinkedIn country reports super useful when I get them from our account manager, and I'm very excited about the stuff that LinkedIn's going to bring to the table tonight. They obviously have a very wide reach. Of like the kind of ICT sector as a whole, from kind of system administrators to support through to like real software developers. And Ray's going to run us through a little bit about that. He's had an interesting career with career progression from industry to industry. So he's also got some insight on what it takes to move through careers. From there, and that kind of super high level macro approach, we're going to jump into the OfferZen data. So we're active here in the Netherlands. We did a survey recently. We have 500 respondents on a survey, and I've got all that data, and I'm planning to share that with you tonight, and hopefully you can learn a thing or two specifically around the Netherlands tech industry, developer industry, what developers are interested in, and that'll be a bit more of a zoom in. And then the last kind of zoom in is actually speaking to a senior software developer. So finally, last but not least, you'll speak to an actual senior software developer. And Jeremy's had an amazing career and journey. And I think his journey embodies some of the learnings and the data and the stuff that we've seen. So jumping into questions and answers with him, I'm super excited. He's got a crazy track record, worked at like Netflix, Reddit, eBay, a whole bunch of cool stuff, done his own things a couple of times, like really cool things. So super excited about that story. Cool. So before we jump in, some housekeeping, some rules of engagement. The session is interactive. So what's kind of interactive? You're limited to the chat. Unfortunately, you don't have video powers. But general banter in the chat, you can kind of engage there. There's a questions tab as well. Please jump into the questions tab with questions for the speakers right at the end. we will do a question and answer session. So during the sessions, just drop your questions in there. There'll be Anth and the team who are behind the scenes will take notes, and then I'll ask the relevant person at the end in the question session. There'll also be a few polls running, so keep an eye out for that in the polls tab. So please engage there. And then lastly, you can win swag. So if you can enlarge the picture wherever it is for you, you can win a swag pack. Inside the swag pack is a bunch of really cool stuff: t-shirts, magnets, cups, I think a little Lego, and you can win that tonight if you're using the @OfferZen tag, sorry, the @OfferZen handle, or the hashtag OfferZenSwag. So please do that, and we'll announce the winner at the end of the webinar. So get going. You can start doing that now. Before I introduce Ray to get going and kick us off, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Drop your name, where you're dialing in from, just so we can kind of get an idea of who's around. So while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce Ray. We work quite closely with LinkedIn and Ray, and it's what is very exciting, and the reason that we invited them here tonight is their same philosophy that making industry information available to others creates like deep value. So super excited about that, and I've seen a bit of the stuff that Ray's going to present tonight, and really looking forward to it. So Ray, first of all, thank you so much for coming. Second of all, super keen to see what you got.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me, and it's really, really great to be here. So really looking to share some great data and insights about LinkedIn. So with that, I am going to go into presentation mode. So cool. So thanks for the opportunity, Stephen. My name is Raymond Mcdonald. I am an enterprise account director at LinkedIn. I advise our clients on their end-to-end talent strategy. And a lot of the work that I do, as Stephen mentioned as well, is how to use data and insights to make more strategic people-related decisions. So as you might tell from my accent and my lack of a haircut because we're in lockdown, I'm based in Ireland, so not in the Netherlands, not in South Africa. And today I'm going to chat to you for about 10 minutes. And I'm really just going to cover three things because I believe in the rule of three. Number one, we're going to look at the supply side. So what's happening with the member base in the Netherlands, specifically relating to tech. The second piece we're going to look at is demand side. So what is demand like for skills, and particularly tech skills in the Netherlands? And what I can say is a sneak preview that it's very, very high. And then to finish, we're going to look at some trends. So what's happening? We're going to look at some career transitions for developers, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So I'd like to take a step back and just inform you a little bit about LinkedIn. And talk about our mission and our vision. So our mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. And our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. Personally, I believe that LinkedIn can help people like throughout their professional life. So not just at those moments in time when you're looking for a job or when you're researching a company. What we're seeing, and a massive trend, and what we're going to talk about today, is companies are hiring based on skills. So we're going to talk a lot about skill-based hiring. But in terms of how we operationalize that mission and that vision, we operationalize our mission and vision by what we call the economic graph. So the economic graph is a digital representation of the global workforce, where we match people like me, people like you, people like Stephen, so our members, to the companies that those folks actually work for, to the jobs that those companies are hiring for, and for the skills, the knowledge, and the schools that they will potentially have to attend to actually get their dream job. That's how we create economic opportunity. And I'm happy to share that our member base is still growing, and it's growing by 2 new members every second. And particularly with the events of the past 12 months, our engagement on the platform has increased dramatically. So let's look at the Netherlands specifically and what the member base looks like in the Netherlands. We can see that we've 8.2 million members, almost 500,000 companies, 682,000 jobs. But what does this mean for the developer community? Well, I can tell you about the developer community in the Netherlands. The folks at OfferZen were kind enough to share 10 to 15 typical developer roles. So we can see the developer community in the Netherlands is about 60 to 70,000 people. We can see that you guys, the market is relatively fluid. So you change jobs. We can see your median tenure in those jobs is about 1.4 years. So the market is relatively fluid. So demand again for this for talent for all the people on this call is very, very high. Diversity is something that is heavily skewed towards males, and the most common programming languages are SQL, CSS, HTML, and C#. So we're going to go a little bit deeper now into the member demographics of the Netherlands. So in terms of industries, what are we seeing in terms of industries? So the top industries in the Netherlands are healthcare, corporate services, but we can also see that software and IT. So this particular graph is benchmarked against Europe, the European average. The second piece of information that we're going to look at is functional areas. So what we can see from this data and the graph on the left is that there's quite a lot of people in business development in the Netherlands, almost a third extra than the European average. We can also see in terms of information technology that there's a higher concentration of people in the Netherlands than elsewhere. So if you move to the right-hand side, we're looking at the most common occupations. Now, what's interesting but not surprising to me, I've done a little bit of research about the Netherlands, is what we're seeing here is the real entrepreneurial spirit that exists within the Netherlands. So far and away, we can see there's way more owners. We can see that there's way more managing directors, co-owners. So that real entrepreneurial spirit really comes to the fore. And let's not forget, software engineers definitely appear on that list also. So now we're going to look at the generations. So the 4 generations in today's workforce are baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. So don't worry if we're moving a little bit fast through all this. We can share these slides at the end. But the highlight for me here is that with baby boomers and Generation X in particular, there's a much more higher concentration of traditional skills. So if you think about sales, if you think about leadership, whereas millennials, Generation Z are winning in terms of artificial intelligence, data science, design thinking, creativity. So that's the trend that we're seeing across those generations on LinkedIn. So more heavily leaned in baby boomers towards those softer skills. And we're going to talk a lot about softer skills towards the end because they're really important. And we've seen a huge demand or an increase in people actually looking for those softer skills. We all know there's like a great tech community in the Netherlands, but what does that sort of those softer skills look like? In terms of skills with the highest increase in demand, like programming languages with the highest increase in demand across the Netherlands, we see demand for skills associated with cloud computing, programming skills has increased considerably over the course of the past 12 months. And if we take a look on the right-hand side, we can see what those programming languages are look like. So also, we all know in terms, we've all heard like the 4th industrial revolution is upon us, and we all understand how much that's accelerated over the course of the last 12 months and how much that's impacted our personal lives, our professional lives, our roles. So what does that look like on LinkedIn? So we can see now that across these 5 areas, robotics, machine learning, the Internet of Things, big data, that the growth in jobs advertised for those skills has increased exponentially over the course of the last 12 months. So very much we can see demand for skills across those platforms, across our platform has increased quite dramatically. So we've looked at supply, we've looked at what the member base looks like. in the Netherlands. We know that the demand for skills across that member base is extremely high based on our data. But what can you do today? What can you do today to upskill yourself and potentially transition into a new role? What are employers looking for? So what they're looking for is lifelong learners. So we can see trends across the platform that people in tech professions are lifelong learners. They're consistently updating their skills in terms of programming languages. We can also see that given the trends over the last 12 months, that you're going to have qualitative shifts in your career. Skills are the new currency. Your career is going to shift, your career is going to change. So it's really, really important to have a growth mindset, but it's also important to look out and look ahead and keep your finger on the pulse. So we've seen over the course of the last 10 years that industries are going to emerge and industries are going to decline and some industries are going to pivot. And I know Jeremy, who's going to speak later, is Netflix. So that's a great example, right, of a company that used to distribute DVDs. They've moved into online streaming and one of the most successful businesses in the world today. But also looking out and looking ahead, like your actual network is so important. So consistently looking out, building your network, interacting with companies like OfferZen to look for those potential opportunities. So what does the skills gap mean for you? So on the left-hand side, I'm going to say something completely obvious, but upskilling in tech and keeping your finger on the pulse in terms of the tech solutions that your team already has and the ones that they're potentially looking to implement is super, super important. But on the right-hand side, and we see this through our data as well, that I can't overemphasize the importance for doubling down on soft skills. We've seen a huge demand for soft skills across the platform, particularly if you're thinking about moving into that senior IT role. If you're transitioning from a senior engineer, a software engineer, you're potentially looking at CTO, something like that. Having those softer skills, those leadership skills, those collaboration skills are super, super important and are what our clients are looking for. So what we're looking at here is potential development paths for a software engineer. So our economic graph team have done a lot of work, and I'll share some really cool links with you so you can actually plug your own role into our economic graph and see where your skills gaps lie and look at your potential transitions into your next role. So one of the things that I'm really focusing on with my clients right now is that piece around internal mobility. So what we're looking at right now is possible development paths for a software engineer. So these development paths are based on transitions that we see happening on the platform almost every day. So the roles on the left-hand side, your systems developers, your full stack engineers, your technology specialists, we can see that these roles can potentially transition to a software engineer. We see the skills gaps in these roles in the middle, like React.js, Node.js. So, and of course, like across the platform, we see people upskilling in terms of how are they going to fill those skills gaps. So after today's call, I will share that link to our economic graph. And also between LinkedIn Learning and Microsoft, we've unlocked a lot of free courses that I'd be super happy to share with you. And there's a combination of those softer skills and technical skills also. So what are the fastest growing skills that we see for tech talent globally? So if you can scan that article there, you'll get a link to it. And I think there's also some free courses in there as well. What we can see is cybersecurity is number one, network and engineering number two, analytical skills, and so forth. That's just across IT. The next piece we're going to look at is engineering. So the fastest growing skills for tech talent across engineering is React, Docker, AWS. So I guess to summarize, what I would say is demand for this talent globally, but in the Netherlands in particular, is really high. We can see across the platform that skills and skills-based hiring is something that our clients are very keen to pursue. So in terms of like your own development and how you pursue that development, like updating yourself and skilling yourself up on tech skills is really important. But please don't forget those softer skills. And I'm really looking forward to answering some questions at the end with Stephen and Jeremy also. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you at the end.
Amazing. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. So to all of you, just a reminder that there is a poll happening in the chat thing. If you are wanting to participate and answer some polls and ask some questions, we'll ask those at the end, answer those at the end. For now, I'm going to jump into my presentation, which I'm going to share with you in a sec, which you should be able to see now. And hopefully you can see my laser pointer. If you're a cat, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to jump now into a little bit more of a zoomed in, kind of more qualitative, softer data view on the Netherlands. So we, as I mentioned earlier, our mission at OfferZen is to help developers grow in their careers. One of the ways we do that is getting people jobs, but we do a bunch of stuff when we're not doing that. As I said, jobs, we have a mentoring program where senior devs mentor juniors. We do a lot of data stuff, just like LinkedIn, which we talked about, and that's what we're talking about today. We also we have like content by devs for devs. So we try and help people that have this amazing like knowledge around things that they've learned while releasing a previous product or whatever the story is, that aren't great writers. So they work with our writing team and help make that knowledge available to the world. And then another thing we do is these events called Make Days or Make Evenings. And the current one is you can build a self-watering plant with a little Arduino, it gets delivered to your door, and you can hang out with some other devs. It's not like this where you're watching a presentation. It's a Zoom call where you can actually like interact with everyone and you're kind of all on the same page. And you can actually talk to other humans, which, if you remember, is actually quite fun. Cool. Reminder, swag competition. Hashtag OfferZen swag at OfferZen. It's never too late to win the swag pack. Okay, so what are we talking about tonight? This thing. So we did a survey of developers in both South Africa, where our home base is, and the Netherlands. This is the Netherlands version. We had 500 qualifying respondents, I think 900 actual respondents, but we qualified people based on purely software developers that we kind of are full-time software developers that get paid to write code. So generally, it's a little bit of a smaller subset, a little bit more focused than the previous data that you would have seen from Ray's side. So a little bit more micro. And this is an online report, as you can see with my amazing screenshot Giphy thing. You can go to it and interact with it. And you'll also see that this data is completely free to download as a CSV, poke around, and do stuff with. So we did some stuff with it, and that's what I'm going to run you through in 3 sections, because I like Ray's rule of 3. Firstly, background in education. Secondly, we're going to look a little bit at skills and learning, and then jump into careers. Cool. So the senior dev, you'll have heard the term before, and there is no definition for a senior dev. So we've got some things that I found at least super interesting that help us understand what this means. So in our survey, we asked people to report their seniority. And that generally, for people that have a title, would be defined by their title, and for those that don't, would be self-reported. So this is self-reported seniority by years of experience. So the way that you read this, these colors will stay the same throughout the rest of the graphs. Light blue is junior. This one is yellow. It is intermediate. This blue area is senior, and the purple is tech lead or management, which is this one. So what's interesting about this is you can see the distribution of these self-reported brackets over years experience. So a junior, you can see around 50% of them are between 1 and 2 years experience and 2 and 4. An intermediate, if you look at the area under the yellow, generally between 2 and 4 years experience through to like between 4 and 6 and 6 to 10. What we're looking at here is seniors. Senior, what is a senior dev? 6 years plus, all the way up into 15 years plus. So anything above 6 considered a senior. And tech lead or management, generally 10 to 15 years experience plus. You can see that slope's a lot more aggressive than the senior side. So what I find very useful when looking at these for the first time is when someone says to me, oh, I'm an intermediate developer, I've got some kind of a correlation of how I can map that on what the general kind of populace of software developers looks like. As I said, we also did this in South Africa, and I found this quite interesting, so I thought I'd share. The blue line, which is this line, is the Netherlands, and the green line, which is South Africa. You can see that South African developers report themselves as senior. So I've bucketed senior and tech lead for the purposes of this graph. I did look at the individuals. It's pretty much on trend. They report themselves as senior earlier in the years of experience. So you'll see that this area of graph above and to the left means that there are more people calling themselves seniors or tech leads at 4 to 6 in South Africa relative to the audience size than in the Netherlands. What is interesting is that the Netherlands overall respondent base is slightly more experienced in general. So it could be that there are just more experienced software developers in the Netherlands. But what is interesting, I think, if you are a senior dev and you're getting a colleague from another country, or you're looking at hiring someone from another country, or you're applying for a job in a new country, remember that there are differences between regions in just the word senior software developer. Cool. This was pretty interesting. I thought of the people that have degrees that are senior software developers, over 50% of them have a comp sci degree. And then STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, big portion next, and a couple of people with business degrees, humanities, and other degrees. Cool. These graphs, again, the colors are the same. What I find interesting about these graphs is they're ordered in decreasing seniority. So tech lead, senior, intermediate, and junior. And this graph is where developers first learned to code. So the question is not the only place you learn to code, but where first. And the first one is I am self-taught. And that is the primary selected option. So most developers taught themselves as their initial entry point. And what is cool about this is when you see a graph that is shaped with a slope from left to right, like this, that means that in general, the more senior, it's favored by the more senior brackets. When it's shaped the other way, like this at university, it's generally more the juniors or the intermediates. So at my workplace and the boot camp as well. So what's quite cool here is that you can see that seniors generally learned themselves, and a lot more juniors relative to seniors learned at universities. I think that obviously also makes sense, since coding has only become more prevalent and available at universities of late. Cool. So remember, this is not they only learned at university. If you university and self-taught a bit, it's just where you started. Cool. This is also, again, quite an interesting distribution graph. This is when they started coding. So what is amazing is how many people started coding less than 12 years old. And you'll see that it goes in decreasing order of seniority here. So a tech lead has more chance of having started coding super young, then senior, then intermediate, and it reverses out at the higher levels. So essentially the higher seniorities started coding even earlier than the intermediate or the kind of the more junior. And that's at age level, not how many years ago, just to control for people just being older. Cool. And it's unsurprising that these guys are self-taught, guys and girls are self-taught, and they started coding earlier because I actually think that software development is fun. and they code for a passion. So if you are a maker, you will know that making stuff is what you do. It is existential, and you'll do it whether it's your job or not. And you can see that's very much so for the tech leads and the seniors of the world. They very much agree with the statement. So the heart panda eyes, that means agree. The crying panda, disagree. And in between, it's the scale. You get it? The strongly agree bracket, very heavily skewed towards the seniors. So seniors, people that like to code for fun. It's pretty cool insight, I thought. The salary, average salary by seniority. So the light orange background that you'll be seeing, that represents the upper quartile and the lower quartile. So if we look at tech lead or management, that band represents 50% of respondents, and the dot in the middle is the median. So the top here for tech lead is 88,000 euro. The bottom is 63, middle is 73. So the median is 73. And at the senior, it's 55, 60 in the median, and 73 at the upper quartile, which is the 75th percentile. So that gives you some idea of the averages and the range in which software developers, what they're earning at an annual level. Cool, that's some stuff about salaries. And then we asked the question, what is your favorite OfferZen t-shirt? So we've been going for quite some time in South Africa. We're pretty new in the Netherlands, but we have a big storeroom full of t-shirts here in the office, of which there are many designs. And the one which I found quite ironic is the very simple typographic design, which was the winner, much to our designer's dismay, I think. But there are a bunch of cool designs. Thought it was just fun to add that. You can go to that link if you want to see all of the designs. That This Is a Joke t-shirt, by the way, is in the swag pack that you can win. So if you also like it, do the sharing thing. Cool. So skills and learning. Let's jump into that. Most used languages. So we asked the question, what languages do you use the most? It was multi-select, so you could select many. Yes, SQL is officially a language. And you can see JavaScript coming out tops by quite a long way, skewed a bit to the junior side. We go JavaScript, SQL, TypeScript, Python, C#, Java, Bash, and then PHP at the end. And you can see that PHP's got a pretty heavy junior sway. And same thing with JavaScript, which we thought was quite interesting. Cool. Those are the most used languages in order. And the most used frameworks, now this is filtered only to senior devs. Again, when I use the word senior devs, I mean senior devs and tech leads. Coming out tops, Node, Node.js, number 2, .NET Core, and then number 3 kind of all together, finishing at the same time with a photo finish, ASP.NET, React, and Angular. So you can see that kind of corresponding with the kind of heavy JavaScript and then the kind of heavy C#. The languages that on the previous slide. Cool. Looking to learn languages less frequently than counterparts, but still at least every year. So what Ray was talking about, lifelong learning, growth mindsets, this is very much the case, and it stays the case. So even as a senior software developer, developers are looking, at least 50% of senior software developers looking to move jobs within a year. So that includes once every few months and once a year, which is a material amount. You can see that the people that are looking to move kind of within a few months, it's skewed towards the juniors, and once every few years kind of skewed the other way. So younger developers moving more frequently. When I say younger, less experienced developers, and more experienced developers moving less frequently. And one would probably expect to see something like that, given that young developers are trying to figure out where to specialize, find a place that they like, whereas seniors are moving more into specializing and growing. Cool. Oh, wow, sorry, I completely messed that up. This is learning languages, not moving jobs, which is another one I have later. So learning languages, it also looks the same, which is why I'm confused. This is learning languages. Again, it does correlate to specialize, but this is specifically around learning languages, not moving jobs. What are they looking to learn? the outstandingly interesting change from last year, so we did this last year in South Africa as well, a similar survey, and Python really coming out of nowhere as a thing that everybody is really interested in learning. Quite an interesting gap here where tech leads not that interested in learning Python. We found that quite interesting, but Python really pushing ahead, with seniors also rating it quite far ahead as the thing that they're looking to learn. Java being junior suede, I think that's quite interesting. And TypeScript and Rust being senior suede. Thought those were quite some interesting observations. And not really data, but more anecdotal stuff. We see an amazing amount of giving back from senior developers, whether that's coaching at a make day or teaching their kids to code. I think a lot of senior developers taught as young children. And we see at make days devs bringing their kids, which is amazing to see. A lot of people mentoring devs with us, and people writing and speaking. You'll not recognize that guy. He also gives up a bunch of his time to come and speak tonight. He's also written on our blog, and we have hundreds of developers that have done all of these different things. So we live and breathe this giving back mentality that comes part of growing. So thought I'd also just mention that. And also to thank all the devs that have given back and helped our community. Cool, careers. Hopefully we'll find the graph that I've already explained. This was quite cool. We asked developers to free text list companies they'd be keen to work at. All the usual suspects there. This is not very scientific. It's like kind of free text mushing together type thing. So it's indicative. What is interesting to see is the Dutch bank ABN AMRO there as the only one that made the list from the Dutch side, and then the ESA from Europe side, which is cool. Then what do devs value when thinking about their careers? So the number one thing that developers are thinking about is challenging projects. And I think this comes down to lifelong learning, having that growth mindset, and really pushing forward on always growing and being better. New languages and frameworks coming through second, with company growth projections coming in third. You can see here the mentors and coaching one that is swayed quite heavily by juniors, which is understandable, as we understand juniors really valuing coaching as well as training availability. So you see that same shape there. Option to switch career path next, training availability, and then the last one being a very well-defined career path. So these are the things that they value when thinking about their careers. And this is the graph that I was another graph I was mentioning is, when are you looking for your next job? And it starts on the left with people looking now, people looking within 3 to 12 months, within a year and a bit, over 2 years, and over 5 years. And you can see, you can see a lot of developers looking for jobs in the next 3 to 12 months, or looking for their next gig. And what is interesting, I think, is the people that are interested in staying at a company for a longer term swayed more towards seniors. So tech leads kind of flattening out between 2 to 5 years. And I think as one, I would guess, this is completely just my guess, as you get to tech lead, you start to look more as it almost moves into a career change where you're starting to move into management and stuff, where it requires you to start thinking about moving again. But they're still way higher than intermediates who aren't all that interested in staying somewhere for more than 5 years. Cool. And if they are thinking about leaving, why? The number one reason, poor management, and second, poor work-life balance. So I think that's pretty interesting. Number three, better salary, moving down to growth, which we see again. This is all going to be shared afterwards if you want to go through it in detail. And as I said, you can download the data. So non-monetary things you'd consider when assessing a new opportunity. Again, we see languages, frameworks, and other technologies right at the top of things that people are thinking about when they're moving. One might say that people are moving to learn new languages, which kind of moves in with the stay sharp and keep growing kind of conversation that Ray was talking about. And for those that aren't looking at moving, what are they staying for? Good work-life balance. I think on the previous one, you'll see office environment and company culture being there. We've got poor work-life balance as a thing that people would do to leave, and good work-life balance being a thing that where people stay, or a factor where people stay. And I think that's really interesting, especially in the lights of like COVID and our new remote reality. Cool. So recap: senior devs are almost evenly distributed, 6 to 15 years plus. Tech leads, 15 plus. Senior devs are passionate, resourceful, they code for fun, they've taught themselves, they started at a young age. JS is leading the pack for now from a skills perspective amongst the senior developers in the Netherlands. But even senior devs are moving around a lot and trying to learn new languages often. And senior devs want challenging projects and growth. Other thing that they value is autonomy. So good work-life balance, a good manager that gives them the space to have an impact. And I'd be super keen to find out what is interesting to you from that data. So please drop it in the questions or the polls, and keep the questions. Drop them in, and we'll drop them later. We'll deal with them later, or answer them later at least. Cool. So what else can you do? You can check out the reports online, go play with it. You can also download the data and create more value. Create something cool, create a cool look, share it with your people, share it with the community. We've had some other cool people do that, and we're very grateful that it's being used and people are making cool stuff. Cool. That's it from me, and that's the presentation. We'll do questions after this, but for now, we are going to invite Jeremy over to the stage. So let me just stop sharing. And hopefully Jeremy appears out of the ether.
Hello.
He's here. All right.
You can hear me?
I can hear you. I hope everyone else can.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. Jeremy, first of all, thank you again for joining us. What is the time there and where are you?
I'm in California, where it is 9:42 in the morning.
Okay, that's well before the time that you normally wake up, right?
No, I do have children who go to school, so I still have to wake up at 8 o'clock, but it is
Okay.
before the time my brain usually turns on.
Okay, so let's hope it's gearing up a little bit. Yeah, first of all, like I said, thanks so much for continuously giving back with OfferZen. You've done a lot of stuff with us, spoken at a bunch of our events, and created a bunch of cool things with us, so thank you. I was going to start this with like reverence of your career and how well you planned it, and how amazing the journey was. And then I saw a note in my notes that said, at no point in Jeremy's career did he have a long-term plan. And I realized that we should not be giving people career planning advice, but we can tell a story of at least your career. So I think first question for me is really just to set the stage, and just kind of say, given that you didn't really have a long-term plan, tell us a bit about how you jumped into your career as a software developer, and kind of the very high level route you've taken and how you thought about it.
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, at no point in my career could I have told you what I was doing in 5 years. I kind of just go with the wind, find opportunities, you know. My first opportunity was, I mean, the very first thing I did was working for the university where I was going to school. They had a job application at the computer center. I picked one up, I grabbed it. I ended up working for them my entire college career, and then for a year after that even, until I went to a startup where one of my friends was working, and he was like, "Hey, this place is really cool. You should come here." I was like, "Okay," and so I did. And then, you know, I went back to school for a little bit, and then after school, same thing happened again. One of my friends was at eBay and PayPal, and he was like, "You should come here." So I did. And then for Reddit, I went to startup school. I met the founders. They were cool people, and I just said to them, "Hey, your guys are cool, and I like your product. I want to work for you." And they were like, "Well, as soon as we have some time, you know, as soon as we have budget to hire, we'll let you know." And 6 months later, they messaged me and said, "We've got budget to hire now, so come on by." And then same for Netflix. I got messaged out of the blue from the person who ended up becoming my manager, because he saw my blog post on Reddit about how I was leaving Reddit. and I had a friend who worked there already who was saying that I should come there to work there, and he was gonna put my name in anyway. So I was like, well, if I got multiple angles coming in Netflix, I might as well give it a shot. And same thing, went over there. And it hasn't always been come here and work here and I had a job, to be fair.
Yeah.
The same thing happened at Google and I didn't get accepted there. The same thing happened at Facebook and I didn't get accepted there. So,
Right.
it's not always rosy.
Yeah. So I was trying to think of like, how do we distill that as knowledge? It's basically just like know people and do things.
Well, I think the main thing there is one, build your network, right?
Right.
So most of my best opportunities came from my network telling me about them. And number two is seek out opportunities. I mean, Reddit was not for my network. That was I specifically went to startup school with the intention of meeting those founders, talking to them, getting to know them, and trying to get a job from them. So,
Right.
it was very intentional. It wasn't really planned. But it was intentional when the opportunity arose.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the key.
Well, I think that's an interesting kind of point is that for senior or for software developers at all, there's a lot of choice, right? Everyone is getting kind of inbound messages on various different platforms, and like everybody who knows you're a software developer pings you as soon as there's a job that's open. And obviously, you've had to weigh up these kind of career opportunities, whether you're going for them or they're inbound. Do you have a way of thinking about these things? What are the things that you prioritize, and how do you navigate them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm prioritizing mostly on project opportunity. Will I be able to work on something big, cool, interesting, new to me? I'm
Right.
always looking for something that sort of expands my skill set, works on something new, something different, things like that. Although the best job offer I ever got was somebody who messaged me when I was leaving Reddit saying, "Okay, I'm redoing the Star Wars prequels without Jar Jar Binks. Do you want to help me?" And that was the entirety of the message. Uh, so I guess he never succeeded in his project because that never seemed to happen. But that that one was a hard one to turn down. But yes, I mostly look for opportunities for expansion of responsibility,
Right.
project, scope,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to that sits nicely with the data that we just talked about, that senior devs are really looking for challenging projects. Tell me about Reddit. You started super early there, right?
Yeah, I was the first or second employee, depending on who you ask and how you calculate it, but very early
Okay.
on, yes.
Right, and that's massive scope. Like it's just an open field
Well,
of
not then.
okay.
When I started, it definitely wasn't massive scope. We were pretty
Right,
small, uh, and it was a great growth opportunity, right? It was a chance to really lead the tech from the beginning. I was basically the only one in charge of how we did any sort of DevOps. I mean, we didn't call it that at the time, but
yeah,
how we operated all of our deployments, everything like that. That was sort of what I focused on, system
right,
administration. I did some coding there as well, but mostly I focused on coding for system administration.
right. And that would you so like I'm trying to figure out a little bit about in your mind this you start this like this junior, intermediate, senior in your career. Do you have points that in your memory of when you were like, okay, I think I'm an intermediate now, right? I think I'm senior now. Like, are there
Well,
points?
it's interesting. So when I got to eBay and eBay, PayPal, I was listed as just engineer, right? No, not senior or principal, just straight engineer.
Right,
And I did that for a few years, and I kept getting better and better. And then the promotion actually came literally the same day that I turned in my resignation. I handed over my resignation, my 2 weeks notice, and my boss handed me a paper giving me a promotion to senior engineer.
right,
So that was, I guess, where it stepped up. But then I went to Reddit, and I mean, maybe I was a senior engineer at that point, but I was,
okay,
we were all basically principal engineers because we were all in charge of huge chunks of the application. But I would say Reddit is sort of where I skyrocketed from senior to principal,
right.
because when I left Reddit and went to Netflix, I mean, Netflix only has engineer, but I was effectively operating at a principal level at that point.
Okay, amazing. And so you've also you've picked different companies, right? So you did startup school, and Reddit at that point was like super startup-y. When you got to Netflix, it was not startup-y. It was kind of scale mode, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, well, Netflix was really interesting. They had been around already for 10 years at that point, but they were just getting into streaming. Like streaming was only maybe a year old at that point.
Okay.
And they were just really ramping up on the whole streaming thing. So it was sort of startup-y in that sense, but also had tons of resources because they were a big public company and
Right.
had been around for a while and had a big chunk of revenue from the DVD business. So yeah, I mean, it was there was maybe 1,000 people when I joined Netflix.
And do you when you joined, were you in charge of a team that you worked on?
So that's funny. When I joined, there was supposed to be a manager who joined on the same day to be my manager. But that person ended up backing out at the last minute to go back to their old job. So I ended up sort of being the team lead without intending for that to happen. But then, yeah, I ended up being the team lead for the reliability engineers. We eventually hired another manager. They came in, they left. Another manager came in, left. But the whole time I was basically the team lead for that. So yeah, I worked on hiring and sort of management the whole time, but not in an official capacity.
And how did you experience that? Was that your first shift from like a individual contributor to a lead management type role, or?
It wasn't. Right at the end at Reddit, I was basically the only engineer who had been there for more than a couple of months because everyone else had left.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of the default, engineering manager at that point as well. I ended up hiring a team of 5 people right before I left. And so yeah, I had done some management work, and actually even way back at university, I had been doing management work. For about a year, I was managing a team of 5. I had 5 direct reports as well as 25 indirect reports. So
because
I think had management experience throughout my career.
Throughout, so you've definitely lived it in different shapes and forms. Because I think one of the interesting things when I was looking at the data was as people move into team lead, they start thinking about their career a bit differently, because career progression, once you're senior, you've got this you bringing in the concept of principal engineer or a lead, but a lot of people think that the end of a career path for a senior software developer is management. What is your take on the path of a software developer? How does it fork, or where does it end?
Yeah, no, I agree. Management is the end of the path. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I have friends who are managers who still write code occasionally, but the higher up you get, obviously, the less you can be doing, and you really shouldn't be in the main line of fire path. But yeah, you kind of have to go there. There's this whole myth about we have a tech track that's the same as management track.
Right.
But
that's kind of what I was asking. It's a myth.
That's turned out to be a lie.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's true. It exists that there are some people at some software companies that get VP level pay as individual contributors. But those people because they are world famous. Like if you want to be at VP level pay as an IC, you need to be the best in the world at what you do. If you want to be a VP level manager, you need to be a really great manager.
Right.
So.
Okay. And in that transition, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of going backwards and forwards through managing and kind of leading. What do you think your biggest takeaways from that were? Like, what is your lesson that you would come into if someone's about to go into Jeremy's career path? What would you tell your younger self in that space, having to navigate all of that?
I mean, I have enjoyed my career path. It's been great. I've ping-ponged between bigger company and startup. So, it's different types of experience. I really enjoy leading people, managing people, mentoring people, especially. That's my favorite part, is the mentoring and teaching part, which is why I love to do stuff like this.
Right.
I've definitely leaned more towards the management side and less towards the actual coding side as I've progressed in my career, just because that's kind of what you have to do if you want to progress. But
right. Okay. So I have a question from someone, Alex Steinberg, who sent the question in beforehand, which I think is probably relevant for now. So he asks, so when do you specialize and go deeper, and when do you like generalize and learn other parts of the stack? Like, do we have a, so for Alex, he says that he generally follows the intersection of his interest and the need of the company, but he's wondering if you've got some other wisdom. He used the word wisdom.
Wisdom. I would say I always try to learn the stack when I get to a new company, just because I want to know how my piece fits into the stack.
Right.
When it came to Reddit, I needed to know the stack because I was working on the entire thing. When it came to eBay, it was interesting to learn about these things. So I would seek out opportunities, projects that allowed me to learn other parts of the business, because I just wanted to learn other parts and how I fit into it. So with Netflix, my job and required me to understand how all the pieces fit together. So that was sort of the job. But I like to learn all the pieces of the stack because I like to learn how they fit together.
Right.
Because oftentimes the part that I'm working on, I can find a way to make it better by knowing, oh, hey, this other piece does this.
Right. So you're saying you can be better in the piece of your stack by knowing the rest of the stack better?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. That's super interesting.
But also, you can't spend all your time learning the rest of the stack because you still have to do your job for your part of the stack. So it's a balance.
So I'm going to say no real wisdom other than balance it well.
Well, so I think the real wisdom there is seek out a project that requires you to learn other parts of the stack.
Right.
Seek out a project within your section that incorporates knowing other pieces.
All right. And I think that's part of seniority and increased responsibility. Understanding that being responsible for the integration points in the stack is per definition increasing responsibility. So I think that's
as a bonus, you'll build your network because you're going to have to meet new people and talk to new people about other stuff.
Right. So increased horizontal knowledge and increased like network even within a company, depending on the size.
Yeah. Exactly.
One of the things when we were chatting ahead of this was you pointed me towards a video of you talking about Python in the cloud back in 2010 on EC2. And 11 years later, we see that Python is the most sought after language. So my question is, do you consider yourself a visionary? No, I'm joking. That's not my real question.
No, I don't.
The serious part of the question
I consider myself lucky.
The serious part of the question is, if you had to use your visionary mind again, there's a bunch of senior developers on the call, you need to think about kind of where we're headed. Where do you think we're headed and where people should start thinking or putting their efforts?
That Python is growing again is because of AI, machine learning, data science, right? So Python has amazing data science libraries. These things tie into machine learning and AI. Everything is starting to get some bit of machine learning, and then machine learning is just becoming a general term for using statistics and math to make determinations. But I think that's kind of where we're going and this has been the case forever, right? Is automation. You can't get to where you want to be without automating most of what you're doing. When I was doing reliability in Netflix, we always talked about how the only way to get to 5 nines of uptime is if most everything is automated. Remediation needs to be automated. And the way you do that is through data analysis and coming up with automated ways to do remediation. So, I think that's kind of where we're going, is automating everything by using statistics, data science, machine learning, actual AI things.
Yeah, I think so. One of the other questions, which is the top question on the actual report, if you go over to the Netherlands report, was what do devs think will be the most interesting or promising industry in the next 5 years? And AI is at the top. And it kind of
not surprising.
So I guess your Python meets data religion thing is true. So we've got a bunch of questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to invite Ray back so we can kind of bounce them with him as well. But while Ray's joining, the first question is for you. So I'll ask it in the meantime. So Richard wants to. Hi Ray, welcome back.
Hey guys.
So Richard wants to know from Jeremy, what are your suggestions for juggling side projects while working full time?
I mean, when I didn't have kids, it was a lot easier because I had plenty of time in the evenings to do that kind of thing. now that I have children, they're basically my side project. But before that, I mean, I still have some side projects. I tend to do them late at night and on weekends. It's not easy. You have to sacrifice something else, right? Is pretty much the only answer there. You have to sacrifice going out or watching a movie or whatever. Hopefully your side project is so interesting that you don't consider it a sacrifice. You're excited about working on your project instead of watching, Godzilla versus King Kong.
Tell me about your Jeopardy Bell side project real quick. I think that's quite a cool story.
The which one?
The Jeopardy.
I mean, that wasn't much of a side project. It was literally just programming my Echo devices to make an announcement throughout my entire house that Jeopardy starts in 3 minutes, which is a way of balancing my work life, because where I live in San Francisco, Jeopardy starts at 7 p.m. And so the alarm goes off through the whole house. And if I don't come out within 1 minute, my kids are coming in here to remind me that it's time for dinner and Jeopardy. So it's a way to force me to stop working at 7 p.m. every day, no matter what's going on. I have to pretty much drop at 7 o'clock because they expect me to be out there at 7 o'clock.
Self-enforcing your work-life balance. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
In the new world, you have to hack your own self.
I mean, we've used the Echo for a bunch of stuff, like to get my daughter to school on time, since she's doing remote school this year. We don't have to walk her or drive her anywhere, so we just set up a bunch of Echo alerts that tell her you should be brushing your teeth now, you should be getting dressed now, you should be sitting at the computer now. And now we get to sleep in because Alexa is the one who's telling everybody what they need to be doing in the morning.
Responding to you. Yeah, you can't get 5 nines of obedience from your daughter without automation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question for Ray. So the question is, I'm not sure who's from, what are the most sought after skills, soft skills, and how do you think employers are evaluating these soft skills?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the evaluation piece. So how employers evaluate soft skills. It's generally through like a competency-based interview, right? So can you tell me a time when? Can you tell me a time when you collaborated? Can you tell me a time when you had to persuade somebody from one opinion to another opinion? So that's kind of the way you do it, or it's a situational type question, like what would you do if? So they'd be the two interview questions, but on the softer skills piece, like what we've seen over the last 12 months is that like creativity, persuasion, collaboration, like emotional intelligence, adaptability, and particularly over the last 12 months, given what we're all going through, like they've been the skills that have been rising up to the fore on the soft side.
Okay, and so I think that's those. I've always wondered personally. So I'm gonna ask my question. And kind of for either of you, the merit of those two questions. So one is, tell me about a time you did X, and the other one is, how would you do X? Any preference between those if one had to choose?
Well, I mean, tell me about a time when is almost like you're telling somebody your experience of when you've done something. My other little hack around that is that like I personally use like the STAR method when I'm answering those questions. So it's situation, task, action, result.
Right.
And that's what I go through when I'm answering those questions. And sometimes I even shorten and I just go, here's the situation, here is the result. And because you have a tendency to kind of waffle or elaborate too much during your interview.
Yeah, no one cares. I just want to know what the result was and whether you can do the thing.
Exactly.
We have another question from the audience for Jeremy. So how does work history compare to having a demonstrable GitHub portfolio? Demonstrable in the States, yes. How does work history compare to having a demonstrable GitHub portfolio in terms of value and looking for new opportunities? As an employer is going to check, like you worked at these companies versus, whoa, check all of these things, open source, side projects.
I will give bonus points for having an active GitHub, but I will not penalize you for not having one. Not everybody has a GitHub. Not everybody has time for public side projects, right? Sometimes a lot of people, all of their work had to be closed in private. So, you know, I'm not going to penalize someone for not having one, but it definitely helps if you do have one. If I can go there and I can see that you have a project that's active, or you've made some good contributions to another project, or you have something with a lot of stars, that's definitely going to be bonus points. And like, I personally don't have much of a GitHub myself. I occasionally will share little projects that I've done, or, you know, useful tools or utilities on my GitHub, but that's about it. Because most of my coding has all been either for stuff that at home that isn't really shareable, or for work, and where I can't share it. I mean, Reddit code is open source, and you can see my contributions in there. But
not everyone has commits on Reddit to post about, but
and honestly, I barely have any. Most of the stuff I did there was all in the private repo of, you know, it was all anti-fraud, anti-cheating stuff, and server deployment stuff. So
yeah. Okay. Another question for you, Jeremy. Obviously, you've worked at some big companies and had like some serious amounts of responsibility on your shoulders, especially being SRE at scale. Like, that's pretty wild. The question from the audience is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome?
You kind of just get over it, I guess. I mean, I've always sort of felt like, you know, how am I responsible for this? But once you just start getting into it, I guess it just kind of goes away. Like, I guess, I don't know. I never actively tried to get over it. It just sort of went away after a while. Like, I guess after a while, I realized I'm not an imposter after all. Like, I do deserve to be here, and people seem to respect what I'm doing. And it seems that I'm doing the work well. So I would say that went away when I got to Reddit, because there wasn't anyone to like worry that I was impostoring. Like, it was just a few of us, so there wasn't much to. It either worked or it didn't, right? If I was an imposter, it wouldn't work. So
yes. So results and high trust environment, that really helps.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Cool. Another question for Ray, which I'm really excited for the answer. Does LinkedIn data show any insights on work from home adoption since lockdown started?
Yeah, it's a great question and super topical. So Microsoft has thought about this a lot. Like LinkedIn has thought about this a lot. And like Stephen, even before the call, I shared a rest up week. So next week we're heading into a rest up week where LinkedIn is giving everybody a week off work. So one of the factors behind that is that like people are exhausted. Like, people are working like much longer hours. Like, they're always on. Like, your home life and your work life, like, the lines have never been more blurred. So I guess, like, you know, I'm lucky enough to work for a company where they really put a huge focus on like our own wellness, our well-being, that we're taking care of ourselves, etc. But like, they polled us on Glint recently, and I think the results of that poll, loosely speaking, were that like 50% of the people would like a more blended approach to work. So an office work from home blend. 25% want to go back to the office. More the younger folk, because they're young and they want to go out at the weekends and Thursday and Friday nights, and 25% want a like a fully remote kind of situation. But that's what we're seeing at LinkedIn. I'll share the Microsoft report as well. It's pretty interesting.
So we also we did a remote survey similar to this one, and it was quite interesting that we saw that the response is not unanimous, which is interesting. So if you want remote, and some people explicitly don't want remote. They're not apathetic. They just don't want remote. They want to go into the office. So if you go full remote, you are going to necessarily make some people unhappy and exclude some people. I know that because I'm in the Netherlands. The majority of my team is in South Africa. But I think what is interesting there, and at least if you go into that report, then I think there's a video recording somewhere if you Google it, It's about workplace personalization. It's about giving people options now. It's the same thing. It's autonomy, right? We have to give that to people. I think that's what our data showed, which was quite exciting. Another question for me this time, Jonathan wants to know, is there a market trend of SA devs working remotely with foreign companies, earning Forex while staying in South Africa? I do not have that data. We do have the data of whether developers are interested in working for companies abroad. We have it for both the Netherlands and South Africa. In South Africa, it is a lot of developers. I think well, we have to be remiss to use the data to use the real numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but a lot of developers would take an opportunity if they're offered one. And I think 1 in 3 are actively looking. So there's a lot of people looking for moving out of the country. We didn't ask whether you would take a job in a different country. That said, we are operating in both Cape Town and Amsterdam, where I am, and we have companies that do hire South African software developers remotely, and that is a non-zero amount of people that are being hired remotely by Dutch companies and working in South Africa. So I don't have real trend data on it, but it's definitely happening, and we've, at least for OfferZen, new OfferZen in the Netherlands, we're seeing that grow. So personally, it sounds great living in Cape Town earning euros.
I was just going to say the same thing myself. If I could get a nice house in Cape Town on the sea, earning euros, perfect.
Yeah, happy. So some of the things we've seen there is at least the Dutch companies' appetite for South African software developers. It's in the same time zone. It's English, culturally is very similar. So there are a lot of factors at play, depending on how that all kind of unfolds. But I'm talking from opinion now. We don't like to do that. So move to the next question. Jeremy, what has been your experience trying to manage work-life balance in the US with work and the kids?
A European must have asked this. It's not really.
Why in the US? I don't know specifically.
Because we have no legally mandated leave of any kind.
Right.
It hasn't been a problem for me because I've been extremely lucky to be privileged enough to work at companies that provide leave policies anyway. So for me, it's never been a huge problem. When I worked at Reddit, I had a terrible work-life balance, but that was by my own choosing. And the fact that I was commuting 2 hours each way to get there. But that was by my own choosing. Once I had children, I, switched and, I was working at Netflix first, and that definitely helped because it got rid of the commute, but I ended up spending most of that time just at work anyway. And then once I had kids, I actually left Netflix to go work on my own. So that was how I managed it, but that was because I was in the extremely lucky position of being able to do that. Right. So, but it's hard around here for sure. Most of the tech companies around here, though, provide, leave that's very similar to Europe, family leave, that kind of thing. So it's not a huge problem if you are lucky enough to get a good job with a tech company around here. But if it's not, then yeah, it's going to be a problem.
I'm interested, did that work out how you thought it was? Because I know a lot of people, including myself, that when you have your first child, you're like, okay, I'm going to work for myself and I'll have more time. It kind of doesn't work out that way often, because when you work for yourself, you never stop.
I had more time for the kids, which has been wonderful. Definitely it's problematic, especially if you work from home, where a lot of people, especially children, do not understand the difference between playing at home and working from home. Yeah. So, it's really hard to turn down your 3-year-old when he comes in and says, let's play Legos now, Daddy.
Yeah.
Like, well, I kind of do want to play Legos right now.
Yeah. I did a call with doing Marble Run yesterday. It was actually quite fun. So I definitely know the thing. Okay, another question for Jeremy. What are some of the reasons that have made you, or signals that made you turn down a job offer in your past?
Turn down a job offer? Have I turned down a job offer? I turned down one job offer, and that was only because it was I was choosing between that and Netflix, and that other company was up and coming startup, which is now a public company, Cloudflare. So it was basically choosing between being about number 20-ish at Cloudflare or going to Netflix. And one of the main reasons I chose Netflix was just the commute, because Cloudflare was in San Francisco,
Right.
and Netflix was home.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the main thing. I love the people that I knew the founders. I knew a couple of the engineers there. I knew it was a great place to work. So that was the only factor. If I was going again, though, my main thing that I'm looking for is who I'm going to work for and what their management style is like.
Okay.
You know, are they going to be micromanager? Are they going to be kind of hands off, let me do my thing? Are they going to help me with career progression? Are they going to help me find opportunities within the company? Are they senior within the company and can help me navigate the company? That kind of thing. That's what I'd
Yeah.
be looking for if I went to a new corporate job.
Cool. That's
That'd be my
a
main
great
thing.
answer.
Somebody who can help me navigate internally.
Yeah. People take jobs for managers as well, which is what you're
Yeah.
saying. You know?
Oh yeah,
okay.
I have a couple of ex-managers who I definitely work for again. If they called me up and said I got a job, I would be there, no hesitation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a truth. Okay, so a question for each of you, lightning question, 30 seconds. What is one piece of practical advice you would give someone who's basically starting out their software career in 30 seconds or less? Practical advice, just starting out. What is it? Jeremy, you go first.
Find a project that lets you expand your knowledge in either systems or programming language. That would probably be the biggest thing. Look for opportunities to do something that you don't know and aren't comfortable with.
Great.
Jeremy,
Go.
yeah, Jeremy's answer is what I expected. My answer is probably going to be what you're going to expect. So for me, it's working on your network. So like looking for opportunities, working on your network, your own personal network is so valuable. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Yeah. Sounds like, Jeremy, you've been doing a fair share of that throughout your time as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
As I said before, finding new projects is a good way to build your network, especially at a bigger company.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up there. There are a bunch of other questions in the chat. We'll kind of move them to Twitter. Find Ray or Jeremy or myself on Twitter if you have any more questions. But want to say thanks so much to Ray. I know you put a bunch of work in, and the folks at LinkedIn really helped out to get some data together. So thank you, Jeremy, for waking up so early, putting in your, and for helping and for continuously helping us out with these things. We really appreciate it. It's just so great to have someone with an experience that we only like kind of read about in the books. You know, it's a kind of a whole nother perspective coming from across the pond. So we really appreciate you tuning in. Also want to say special thanks to Alex and Anthea who made the webinar happen. You guys don't often get a shout out, so shout out to you. You guys did an amazing job, so thank you. And we'll send all the resources that Ray had, and we have, we'll try and include the remote report as well because we spoke about it. We'll send all of that stuff through afterwards. And yeah, we have an announcement to make on the swag winners. So there were so many posts that we had to choose. And the winners are Richard O'Brien and Alex Steinberg. So get in touch with Alex, our Alex at OfferZen. She will hook you up with your swag packs. And yeah, last of all, at OfferZen, we believe that the value comes from the community. That's why our data comes from the community. That's why our blogs come from the community. That's why our speakers come from the community. So we couldn't have done it without Ray and Jeremy. Thanks so much for coming. And for everyone else who's tuned in, you're part of the community too. Thanks for all the tweets. Thanks for all the questions. And thanks for making tonight possible, I guess, by joining in. Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully there's some actionable piece of information and something you wake up in the morning and your life is better for it. If not, let us know. But yeah, thank you so much and have a good evening.